This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region and beyond. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything, from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 265 of the GardenDC podcast. Whether you're a beginning or seasoned gardener, this episode contains great advice and ideas for growing sedums in your garden. In this episode, we talk with plantsman Brent Horvath all about sedums. The plant profile is on time, and we share what's going on in the garden as well as some upcoming local gardening events in the What's New segment. We close out with a last word on Thanksgiving from Christy Page of Green Prints. I've grown dozens of sedums in my own garden, from creeping groundcovers to the taller varieties. I have one particular favorite I want to share with you. Be sure to listen to the end of the episode for that. This episode, we're joined by Brent Horvath. He is the owner and president of Intrinsic Perennial Gardens. Welcome, Brent.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Great to have you on, Brent. And we're going to talk about all kinds of sedums, from tall to small. But before we get into that wonderful plant family, we like to ask our guests here on the GardenDC podcast, were they born with chlorophyll in their veins and a green thumb?
I was definitely surrounded by it, but I wouldn't say I was born with it. I sowed my first seed direct in the ground at home, and it happened to be radishes. But I didn't really catch the bug until high school. Through 5th or 6th grade and through high school, I worked for my dad at his garden center, Intrinsic Perennial Gardens. We were a field dug perennial nursery, so we would dig out plants from the ground, put them in a box, and people would take them home to plant. This was kind of just as plastic pot culture was becoming part of the trade. But I did realize in high school when I took horticulture that this stuff is easy for me because I grew up surrounded by it. My mom had a flower shop. My dad had a landscape company for 10 years and then a garden center for 10 years. And I pretty much knew everything that we were learning in horticulture. So it came very easy.
And so when you got out of high school, what did you pursue for a career?
Yeah, so I went to Oregon State for ornamental horticulture, and I did take some other kind of landscape design, golf course maintenance classes, but my focus was on the ornamental side of things, and by that point, I kind of knew that I was interested in the perennial end of things. So I talked to my dad about if he would open up a garden center or retail business again, or if he would go into the wholesale end of the business. And he said, garden center, you'll have to work very hard, but you'll make a good living. He said, wholesale, you'll make a better living, but you won't have to work quite as hard. So that was kind of an easy answer. And then he had already purchased the property in Hebron where I have my wholesale nursery. And so after I graduated Oregon State in 1991, I came to the property and started to develop the wholesale nursery as a division of our landscape company, Intrinsic Landscaping.
And quick question about the name Intrinsic. That was something your dad named the business, and why did he name it that?
Yeah, he was at the bank opening up a checking account or a business account, and the banker used the word intrinsic. And my dad was a Hungarian immigrant, and he didn't know the word, but he liked the word. So he asked the banker to tell him what that meant. And then he decided right then and there he would name his company Intrinsic.
It is a fun word.
Yeah.
And I think unique too.
Yeah. The way I define it is essential in nature or by nature.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of the plant work you're doing is not just growing wholesale, but breeding and introducing new plants, correct?
Right. Yeah. Besides the kind of wholesale business, which is shipping plants business to business throughout the Midwest, we are supplying new plant genetics into the trade, not just in North America, but also European market and some other faraway markets like Australia and Japan and places like that, Korea.
And a lot of your work is in the American natives, especially prairie plants. Are those popular overseas?
I think it depends on which item. I think the grasses are easily translatable. They seem to be a big part of the conversation in gardening, the naturalistic gardening, the new perennial movement. It kind of is heavily focused involving ornamental grasses. And I was, pretty focused on sedums when I wrote the book, but my breeding work has evolved and kind of focused more on ornamental grasses lately.
And I noticed that you got the 2026 Perennial Plant of the Year for next year from the Perennial Plant Association. The members vote for that, and that's for the Andrew Pogon Gerardii, am I saying it correct, Black Hawks ornamental grass.
Yeah, that one has real dark fall color. It's purple near black. It's a 5-foot tall prairie grass, and kind of late summer, early fall is when the fall color peaks, and that's its primary attribute. But it's got a nice kind of upright habit. It's got a kind of more deep green foliage than the species, and that more reserved habit.
And so you've developed over 100 new perennials under intrinsic introductions, and maybe we can go talk about a few of those that might be in our listeners' own home gardens. I'm thinking especially the Rudbeckia American Gold Rush.
Yeah, that was another Perennial Plant Association Plant of the Year in 2023. But that one, besides the PPA Plant of the Year, it was selected as an All-American selection, which is kind of a national trial on 16 sites. And it won that award in 2020. It was one of the first 2 perennials to get that award. So with that kind of trialing process, it was trialed over a wide area and lots of different conditions, and it performed really well. The plant itself is very disease resistant. It's long blooming, has a really kind of sharp mound-shaped habit, almost like a mum, where you get that dome, and it's kind of heavy flower coverage, kind of touching and overlapping each other. It's got a nice golden yellow color with that typical kind of black-eyed Susan look.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of native purists out there, and this is obviously a nativar or a cultivar. And you described well some of those improvements you made over the straight species, which is more flowers, longer flowering, disease resistant, and that cone-shaped head, I think, allows the pollinators a little more access, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, the plant definitely has pollen. It's definitely attractive to pollinators. At one point, it was in the bud burst kind of trialing program where they were comparing wild species with cultivated forms. I don't know what the results are, but certainly not infertile or anything like that. And certainly has pollen.
Good to hear. Let's move on to the book you referred to earlier, which is The Plant Lover's Guide to Sedums. And that came out from Timber Press. I think it was, I want to say 2016, but you would know better than I.
Yeah, it came out in 2014. In 2015, it got at the time it was called Garden Writers Gold Award. Garden Writers is now plant?
GardenCom. Yeah. So, yep, GardenCom for short for Garden
Yep.
Communicators.
Yep.
Yep. So, yeah, congratulations on the Gold Award.
Thank
And so
you.
the Plant Lover's Guide to Sedums is no longer in print, but still available, through used bookstores, I think on
Yeah.
Amazon. I was able to locate copies through Hoopla, through the library service, even though I have a hard copy sitting around somewhere. Just couldn't get my hands on it in time. So let's talk about some of the selections in the book and about sedums in general. But before we go into that, how about we talk about where you are in Hebron, Illinois? And most of our listeners are in the mid-Atlantic U.S. So if you could describe your growing zone, gardening conditions a little bit for them, and maybe where you are in relation to your next big city.
Yeah, so we're an hour and a half or so north of Chicago, and about an hour from Milwaukee, and about an hour 15 from Madison, maybe a little less than an hour to Rockford. So we're close to an hour away from Lake Michigan. We're in zone 5, I think it's B now, but we definitely get cold winters, negative 20 something below at times in the winter. Right now, we're in the kind of nicer times of November. We're in the kind of 50s today. We've had some 20-degree nights already, but next week it's going to be like 20s and 30s and maybe into the 20s.
And how about your soil conditions?
Oh boy. I mean, I know throughout the Chicagoland, there is a fair amount of clay. We're kind of lucky in the nursery area. We're pretty rich. We're kind of low near some kind of wet areas. We have a pond on the property. So I would call it rich loam, moist loam. Yeah.
You're fortunate to have it.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of the breeding work, growing, I assume you're heading it towards USDA zones, maybe like 5 to 7, 5 to 9.
Yeah, I would say the bulk of our perennials are zone 4 hardy. It's a little less of a focus these days because we are getting warmer, but we have a good licensee in Canada that is very interested in zone 4 hardy plants. That makes a big difference on who they can sell to. But the fact that we're working with a lot of native plants helps a lot when it comes to hardiness. We're obviously working with zone 5 plants because most everything we're doing is outside and working with plants we're already kind of growing in a zone 5 situation.
What do you like to grow yourself in your home garden?
Well, I have dry shade at my house. So in my front yard, I have kind of a meadow where I have stopped mowing and I started planting into the turf and then mowing some paths around the house and the kind of meadowy areas. In the spring, it might be daisies. In the summer, it might be yarrow. And we have a fair amount of carex in my yard. I have a small blue border with blue asters and calamaris and some nepeta and some blue grasses like Senslaria.
And do you bring a lot of your work home?
I don't because it's dry shade. The bulk of my work is on full sun perennials. We have a handful of shade plants that I've worked on, but I haven't introduced a lot of shade plants. I have a hosta, I have a ligularia, I've worked on a stilby, I have a Solomon seal, I have Jacob's ladder, can take shade, geranium maculatum, those are shade. But the bulk of my work is full sun plants, like the sedums.
Yeah, definitely. Most sedums need full sun. So let's transition into that sedum conversation. And first, let's define the sedum family. So I know there's been some shifting around in the Latin categorization, I think because of recent USDA and DNA work on them.
Yeah, At the time I wrote the books, it was part of a series, and they were looking to have the most up-to-date nomenclature at Timber Press. So the bulk, or the sedums, kind of got divided into four main genera that are kind of in the trade. The first being sedum, the second being like the Hylotelephium types, which are like Autumn Joy and Matrona and maybe Pure Joy, or derivatives of Autumn Joy, um, and like Spectabile types like Neon and Brilliant and the white ones. Then the others would be more ground cover types. Fetimus is one of them. Those are like the Sedum Kamchaticum types. And then the other fourth one is kind of less common in the trade. I'm actually, really, when it comes down to it, people are really still using the sedum as the species for the most part in the trade. It's rare that you would find things kind of listed as Petrosedum is the other kind of genus, or Fetimus. Most people in the trade are still using sedum when it comes to selling these plants.
Yeah, I'm glad you said Hylotelephium, if I'm saying it correctly. I just can't imagine, you pick up an Autumn Joy at the store and then you're like, they changed the Latin and didn't just change it to something easy. It's a tough one, and so it's like Hylotel Telephium. And who knows who named that one? I assume that's after somebody's name. Speaking of Autumn Joy, so that's kind of the poster child, the most well-known of the tall sedums.
Right. And the true cultivar name would be Herbstfreude, because it was developed and named in Germany. And by nomenclature rules, you're not supposed to translate, although it's very common, especially in North America. Kind of foreign names get translated into English.
And that direct translation would be fall friend.
Right.
And so we call it Autumn Joy. And I think a lot of people remember buying that when it first came out. And then I have to be honest, Brent, the top complaint I hear about Autumn Joy is that it flops.
Yeah, so there is a technique called Chelsea Chop, and that is based on the fact that when the Chelsea Flower Show is up and running, that is the time when you would take your plant and cut it in half. You could pinch each tip, or you could kind of use a hedge trimmer and just round it out, cut it in half, and that will cause branching. It will cause the plant to kind of slow down. It'll cause it to stay shorter, and it'll be a lot less likely to flop. If it is flopping or opening up or lodging, that's typically because the soil is too rich. Many of these sedums, whether it's from Mexico or from Asia or Europe, they tend to be growing on well-drained sites. They tend to be growing in leaner soil, maybe mineral soils. A lot of the soils are rocky. So if you have it in a rich organic soil, it's going to be a little happy, and a lot of times it will maybe grow too easy and too fast and too big and cause that lodging.
Yeah, they usually will open up in the center and just kind of flop. And some people will use like a peony
cage.
Like a cage that would be put around it. Of course, you could just use a tomato cage or anything like that. So all sedums are members of the succulent family, correct?
Yeah, they're in the Crassulaceae family, which are succulents, yes.
And so that makes them pretty drought resistant.
Very drought resistant, yeah. So they do their kind of transpiration at night when there's less heat in the day and less kind of drying out conditions. So they're called CAM3 or C3 plants, and sedums are in that category where the stomata on the surface of the leaf opens up at night instead of during the day like most plants. And because of that, they're way more drought tolerant. They're less likely to lose moisture from the leaf because of that.
And so when you first plant a sedum, when you bring it home from the garden center, say in a gallon plastic pot, would you add any additional moisture or water it in at that point, or just put it in straight?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, for establishment, you would want to water it. Rarely would it need a lot of supplemental water, but just to get it established, yes, you would want to make sure you water it.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times people look at that drought tolerant label and they think no water ever.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, they're pretty forgiving. It depends maybe on the species, but they virtually never wilt. It would be rare that they did. They would be virtually, maybe if they didn't have soil around them, they might wilt. It's surprisingly drought tolerant and hardy in that regard.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of the lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
Oh, Hilton stay, your beds are soft and cozy. No lumpy couch, no stiff futon, no shower line at crack of dawn. Oh, Hilton stay.
When you want holiday comfort you can count on, it matters where you stay. Enjoy comfortable rooms and friendly service when you stay with Hilton instead. Save up to 25% this season when you book with Hilton. Hilton for the stay. Terms apply.
Sedums are, I think, everywhere throughout the known world, except for maybe Antarctica, right? And they're mainly like on rocky outcrops, like where they're native to where they're used to growing, where they pop up.
Yeah, there are kind of pockets. So Mexico has a lot of what we would call tender sedums. Those are more desert types, and those are maybe even more along the lines of the succulents you see at the garden center that aren't hardy. They look, a lot of them have like really bluish or exceptionally colored foliage. But as far as the hardy types, there's just a handful or more in North America. There's quite a few in Asia, quite a few in Europe, and into the Mediterranean, but very few in Africa. South America is maybe still to be determined. Some of the species are still getting named and discovered in South America, but there are a few out there, are definitely relatives to the sedums. I don't think I have any in the book that are South American, just more Central American, like Mexican types.
And I know there's a lot that are endemic to the Rocky Mountains.
There are a handful. Yeah, they're not typically found in the trade. Those have been, a lot of them have been reclassified to rhodiola, and they're kind of have this thick rootstock and these kind of stemmy little shoots coming off that central point. I don't know how to, almost like a carrot. The root is like a big, thick carrot-like structure, but smaller and more yellow. And then those leaves, those stems are deciduous. So in the winter, they fall off and you kind of die back to just that little root stock. But
go ahead.
They're not very commonly sold in the trade. If they would be sold, it would be typically sold in like the mountain states where they have these kind of rock garden situations and very rocky soil that would kind of be typical of their habitat.
And I was going to say, for our what we call the tall sedums, that we discussed Autumn Joy as, the forerunner. Yeah. Those are, it's tall is relative. We're going to say for our listeners, that's a couple feet. We're not talking 8 feet tall.
Correct. Yeah, and the bulk of the cultivars that are kind of related to or similar in habit and size are all within that 1 to 2 foot range as well. Some of the new breeding has more deep purple, almost black foliage. Some has a reddish or purple foliage, but some are more yellowish flower colored. The flower colors kind of range from soft pink to pink to red.
Yeah, I've seen some, like the neon series, where it's almost like a chartreuse foliage with a dark flower, or then you get the reverse, the dark foliage with a bright flower.
Yeah, and then there's the variegated foliage too. So both the ground cover types and the high-low telephium types have a fair amount of variegated forms. My first patented plant was an Autumn Joy Sport that I found at a nursery, and I named for my dad, Lyosh, and then we put a trade name on it to help sell it of Autumn Charm. But that one, because it's variegated, was slower growing, and it was also a little lower in stature and slower to grow in general, more around 15 to 18 inches tall. But it had a creamy yellow edge to it.
And it probably, because it's more compact, less likely to flop.
Yes.
I would think. And some people have described those tall sedums as looking like a colorful broccoli.
Definitely.
But it is a flower. Broccoli is a flower, an edible one. So speaking of being edible, any pests that really like sedums? I'm going to guess deer still chew on them, even though...
Yeah, they definitely do. They're certainly not resistant. In nursery production, we can have problems with aphids, and also on the production side, fungus, typically Rhizoctonia, is a big problem. That will typically kind of melt out the plant at the base of the stem, cause it to kind of lose its foliage and kind of melt out or fall apart almost in the garden or in production.
And so for the home gardener, it's usually pretty carefree. I don't see too many disease complaints.
It's rare that you would have problems in your home garden. If you did, it would probably be the fact that it came with the plant from the nursery. But Rhizoctonia is something that kind of floats through the air. It's not overly common, but it is around.
And would you just do an herbicide spray, or is there anything to just select out those plants?
I think culture mostly is going to be your first line of defense, making sure it's not overly rich and not overly moist. So well-drained, potentially gravelly or sandy, or and full sun as well.
And we should also talk about, besides pollinator benefits that the sedums offer from their flowers, it has beautiful fall color. A lot of them turn colors. All types of sedums have a really nice autumn look to them.
Yeah, many are kind of yellow to orange and then red to purple, depending on the type. The autumn joy types might be more to the yellow side, but some of the ground cover types like Kamchaticum, those typically have some orange and red in them.
And then when the flower heads kind of dry, I leave mine up until, maybe a heavy freeze or a frost kind of brings them down.
Definitely. I wouldn't cut them back until spring. Typically, they're going to start to swell at the base, and you'll see the new growth starting at the ground level. But at some point, in our case, it's usually April, we would cut them back at that point.
Mm-hmm. Probably for zone 7, most of the mid-Atlantic, I'm going to say that's going to be mid-March.
Right.
Cut back, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's go on to the next big family of sedums, which are kind of the cushion or cloud sedum form.
Yeah. So that was a term I kind of developed for the book. Those are true interspecific hybrids where they have 2 different species as their parent, and the result was kind of an intermediate size Hylotelephium, where it has that kind of more thick and sometimes rounded, sometimes pointy foliage, but in a very kind of strong mound and lots of kind of woody-esque stems, but they're only growing around 12 inches tall in the garden. One of those is Sedum Pure Joy. That's one that's sold by Proven Winners. It has a really soft pink flower, but it almost makes one continuous dome of flowers instead of individual seed heads or flower heads that are kind of separate.
Yeah, I was going to say they're very attractive because they do form kind of this dome on the ground and one big mound, so to speak. So maybe the front of a perennial border would be a good place for them.
Definitely. Yeah, these are near, if you plant them close enough, they can be used as a ground cover or as a border plant. Yep. So typically like 12 to 15 inches apart.
And that does bring us to the ground cover sedums. And, ground covers are near and dear to me, Brent. And so I love using sedums as ground covers.
Yeah, my favorite for a long time was Sedum floriferum Weihenstephaner's Gold. It's a favorite for a few reasons. First of all, it's evergreen. Second of all, it has a really nice reddish purple winter color. It's not so much about the flower, although it does have a nice kind of goldish yellow flower mid-late spring, or I should say late spring, early summer, but it just, it has great vigor. It's easy to propagate. It's easy to grow.
And most of these ground cover sedums, they're maybe 5 inches tall. And
correct.
They will flower.
Foliage-wise, they're typically like 1 to 2, up to 3 to 4, and then the flowers are typically 4 to 6 inches tall. So just above that foliage, that ground covering foliage.
And these low growing ones, a lot of people use them aside from as ground covers. They're using them, say, in a rock garden or in troughs, maybe window boxes or mixed containers.
Yep, they are great for the edge of containers and for crawling in and around rocks and crevice gardens, gravel gardens. The fact that you have a wide range of colors, you have greens, you have yellows, you have golds, you have purples and reds, and different shades of green as well.
And I love the way you can make them kind of be the spiller in a container arrangement, like just by putting them over the edge. So, on a retaining wall, spilling over is nice too.
Yeah, some of the forms that have seed, like Sedum Kamchaticum, that one will, if you have it in a wall, typically those seed will fly around and fill in the other holes in the wall.
And that does brings up propagation. So you're saying there are some that are self-seeding. Others, for ground covers, you might have to kind of break them up and move them around.
Correct. A lot of those ground cover types will have an air root. They'll actually have a root coming off of the stem, even though it's on top of the ground. And you can just peel those off and plant them just like you would a new plant. They might be a little smaller, so they might take a little babying or kind of watching so they don't get taken over by a weed or taken over by another plant. But if you have the right situation, those are easily spread around by little cuttings.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say for a cutting, all you need is a little bit of the stem or even a leaf section.
Yeah, typically you're going to have the leaves closer to the tip, but a lot of times the lower stem, the leaves will have fallen off already, and that's where you would see those air roots. So if you look close, you should see some roots kind of laying there with the stems, and you can just cut them off and plant them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best things, Brent, about sedums is how easy they are to propagate and make more.
No doubt about it.
And that goes for the tall ones as well as the ground cover ones.
Yeah, I've heard of people taking like the autumn joy types and just cutting them off early in spring and sticking them right in the ground and having success. So you could also do it in a potting soil and maybe keep it a little more moist to help it along. But they are easily divided as well. So you can dig them out in the spring and make 4 pieces from one old one and spread it around that way.
It's a great pass-along plant. And we didn't even talk about that sedums make great green roof plants.
Yeah, so that was one of the reasons I started growing a lot of sedums is my brother, who was running intrinsic landscaping, got into installing green roofs. And so we were growing a lot of plugs for him. Those are little kind of 1x1 or 2x2 plants that go direct into a green roof type of situation. And because I was growing a lot of plants for him in the green roof situation, I started looking at new species and new forms to grow. And then I got a call from Timber Press one day asking if I would write a book on sedums. And I thought, wow, I never really planned on writing a book, but when someone asks you to write a book, you got to at least think about it, right?
Mm-hmm. And we're glad you did, because this is a great compendium of all the different great sedums. And I love in the book that you have lists by uses. So like those that are great for spilling over a wall, those that are good for filling in under evergreens or that sort of situations.
Yeah, we have a green roof list. We have them by color. So we have the gold leaf types together. We have the kind of silver and blue forms together, the variegated forms as a group as well.
And well, a lot of our listeners are going to say, maybe sedums aren't so much for me because I have a lot of shade. So are there some sedums that do better in the shade?
There are. A lot of those sedum camshaticum type relatives are tolerant of part shade. Many of the sedum spuriums are tolerant of part shade. There's one from the West Coast called Tornadum, and that one has a white flower. That one does take dry shade as well. If you're in the West, some of the Spathulifolium types, those have like silver foliage. Those are typically growing in like dry shade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm using Sedum Tornadum myself as a dry shade ground cover. It's kind of has a nice round whorls to the look of it and a good creeper for undershrubs and things.
Yep, and a white flower.
If you get some flowers.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say maybe in the shade a little less. And then I noticed that some sedums can actually burn out in hot and humid summers.
Yeah, they actually do their growing at the cool times of the year. That's when they're happiest. They just happen to be very drought tolerant and long-lived. So people kind of think that they can take it hot. They can take it hot to a point, but their strength is in the cool season type growing and the kind of well drained situations. If it was hot and moist, it could be an issue for sedums for sure.
And I know sedums have had their popularity recently as houseplants as well.
Yeah, those would be typical of like the Mexican species. So rubrotinctum is Christmas cheer that has like a little jelly bean leaf. It's real glossy. It can be kind of medium to deep green, and then it gets these kind of red highlights in the fall into winter. Some of the other Mexican species are like blue-green or gray-green little fingers. Like there's the trailing one that is a real common kind of houseplant called burro's tail. Morganianum is the kind of hybrid species, but those are really easy to grow houseplants. As long as they have kind of bright light to full sun, they will perform well as houseplants.
And when you have it, you have it, because I can tell you I'm sitting 2 feet from a burro's tail right now, Brent. And the only bad part is when you knock against it and you shed some of those leaves.
Yeah, that's kind of a seasonal thing. At this time of year, they'll tend to drop a few leaves, but as they get acclimated to inside and lower light conditions, they'll harden up and start to drop less leaves.
Yeah, and a lot of the sedums that are used as houseplants, of course, we can bring them out for a summer vacation, so to speak. But
yeah,
you'll want to bring them back in probably.
Yeah, definitely before a freeze.
And are there some rare sedums that you talk about in the book that are favorites of yours?
Yeah, one is a blue flowered one called ceruleum. I've actually never got it to bloom, or if I did, it was really short-lived. And I don't have it currently, but that one has a real tiny kind of cerulean or kind of porcelain blue flower. That one's pretty interesting. There's Furfuraceum, which is one of the highest chromosome count of any living thing. That is an interesting one. That looks more like a sempervivum or an echeveria. It's kind of got a blue whorl of leaves. There are 1 or 2 species from Mexico with a kind of a hairy leaf, which is not typical of sedums. Furfuraceum is one of those. Those can be a little challenging in pot culture and to maintain horticulturally. But if you have the right conditions, they'll be happy.
And for future breeding for sedums, what directions are you seeing them go in, Brent?
Yeah, so we've been working on some ground cover types, maybe more tighter forms that will keep weed pressure or weed seeds from germinating and growing into those. Disease resistance is a big focus of mine, especially on the Hylotelephiums. Autumn Joy and a lot of those tall forms are not resistant to Rhizoctonia, and so we kind of don't do a lot of growing of those newer forms that are typical in the trade. Even though they look great in a catalog, for us as a commercial grower, they're just a little more challenging than I would like. In the home garden, they might be just fine because there's less disease pressure in that situation. But that's definitely a focus of mine, is disease resistance.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of like the ground cover ones, the Petrosedum like Angelina and Blue Spruce.
Yep.
Are there more coming out in those collections?
We've been working on a red one. There is one coming out called Red Angelina from Chris Hansen in Michigan. So that's promising. But those are going to be kind of red most of the season, and then especially in winter, they'll have that more pointy foliage. like blue spruce, but in the red coloration.
Nice. Yeah, the one great thing about Angelina is it does start off kind of in those sunset hues and then goes to the dark colors in the fall when it's cold. So that'll be interesting to see. So how can our listeners contact you and find out more?
We do have 2 websites. One is for my wholesale business. That would be if you're in the trade and you're looking for perennials that I've developed, or if you're looking for plants in the Midwest, we can help you supply. That would be intrinsicperennialgardens.com with an S at the end. If you're looking to see what I'm working on as far as breeding and new plant introductions, I have a second website called intrinsicintroductions.com, and that shows the bulk of my breeding work. It shows all our ornamental grasses, all our sedums, all our other perennials. So that's a really good resource if you're looking to find some of these items. We have both mail order sources and people on the supply side of things.
And I know that the Perennial Plant Association is having its annual meeting next year in Michigan. Are you at all involved in that?
Yeah. So I'm mostly involved as a member. Sometimes when it's close by, we will have a trade show booth. So they have a small trade show as well. But the bulk of it is meetings and tours focused around perennials and perennial growers and gardens.
So, Brent, if somebody has never grown a sedum in their garden before, what would you recommend for the beginner?
Yeah, so I would say I have 3 or maybe 4 recommendations over and above like the very common ones like Autumn Joy and Angelina. I had already talked about Weihenstephaner Gold as a ground cover type. If you're looking for more of a pink flowered form, there's one called John Creech with green foliage, or Rock Candy is one with a more purple red foliage and ground covering. On the medium kind of cloud size type ones, where they're mostly about a foot tall in the garden, I would recommend Pure Joy from Proven Winners, and then Thundercloud, which has a white flower and more pointy kind of foliage. For the tall types, I still do love Autumn Joy and Matrona. The Sedum spectabilis are great plants, like Neon. There are some newer ones coming out of Walter's Gardens, like Back in Black is one that's very dark in color. That would be like an Autumn Joy type.
Yeah, I think that one is really cool, and I'm trialing that one now, Brent, in my garden. So I'm happy to be growing that one. And I wanted to thank you so much for sharing your sedum knowledge, your plant obsessions with us. Any last thoughts for our listeners?
Sedums are great for a lot of reasons, but one of them, most of those reasons we've talked about, but ease of propagation. So you can start with 1 this year or next year. The next year you can make 4. From those 4 you can make 16. Multiplying it and making more for your own use is a great reason to try and to grow sedums. And just the wide variety of both colors and textures and sizes is the other kind of main reason to use sedum, besides the fact that they're very easy to grow.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brent.
You are welcome.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the ingenious ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
In Walmart's Who-Newville, everyone readied their cart. Amazing Black Friday deals are about to start. Online and in the app, such great deals to explore. Everything you love from tech, toys, and more. The days to save and the ones to remember. It's only the 25th to the 30th of November. Set your alarms. Don't miss out. These deals are epic, without a doubt. The Who's are all ready, but are you? Walmart Black Friday deals await. Who knew?
Thyme plant profile. Thyme, Thymus vulgaris, was previously Oreganum thymus and Thymus colonus. It is classified as a small subshrub or woody perennial. It's native to southern Europe and is in the mint family. It's hardy to USDA zones 5 to 9. This herb has many cultivars and forms, from prostrate to vertical, and the foliage can be dark green, gray-green, or variegated with a white edge. It's used to flavor meat dishes, soups, and stews, and in your Thanksgiving stuffing along with rosemary and sage. The key to growing it well is good drainage and full sun. Don't overwater it, as it's susceptible to root rot. An ideal situation is to plant it overhanging a rock wall in soil amended with aged compost and chicken grit. It can be grown in the garden or in a container. There is no need to fertilize it. Mulch it lightly in winter. Thyme is drought tolerant and deer proof. Pollinators love it. Honeybees are especially attracted to the tiny pink, purple, or white flowers. To start new plants, it's best to take cuttings, as it's difficult to grow thyme from seed. When using it in cooking, pinch off the young stems and strip the leaves. For the best taste, harvest it just before bloom time. You can take up to a third of the plant at any one time. Let it recover before harvesting from it again. Thyme, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, I'm enjoying the leaves turning their beautiful autumn colors, especially the ginkgo tree that's across the street from me at the small community college. It's now in its golden phase and about to just drop all that foliage down. Over at the community garden plot, intern Ellen shared her seed failures and successes on our Fenton Friday blog post. You can check that out at washingtongardener.blogspot.com. And in the garden tips that we shared this week on social media, we focused on perennials, including that most perennials should be divided when they have stopped blooming or their growing phase, meaning spring bloomers divide in the fall, fall bloomers divide in the spring. In local gardening events, I wanted to let you know that next week's episode will hit on Thanksgiving weekend, so we are not posting a new episode. We are going to post an encore of our Gifts for Gardeners episode. Please enjoy that and have a wonderful Thanksgiving week. Local gardening events that you might want to attend over the holidays include Meadowlark's Winter Walk of Lights. Meadowlark's Winter Walk of Lights returns and runs through January 4th. It's a half-mile stroll through Meadowlark Botanical Gardens grounds in Vienna, Virginia. Guests can enjoy hot drinks, s'mores by the fire pit. There are doggies along for the select pet-friendly nights. Tickets are $18 online, and you can find out more about that at Fairfax County Parks. And then Mount Vernon in Virginia is hosting Christmas illuminations. That is celebrated on December 20th and 21st. And you can tour the mansion, the illuminated historic places, take place in 18th century holiday activities, and a spectacular fireworks display over the Potomac at 8 p.m. You can find out more about that at the Mount Vernon website. And downtown in Washington, D.C., the Downtown D.C. Holiday Market has begun on F Street between 7th and 9th Northwest in front of the National Portrait Gallery. You can find vendors selling handcrafts, foods, and my brother's booth there that you might want to stop by. He sells antique prints, including botanical prints that are of interest for many gardeners to have in display in their home. You can find out more information and the hours of that holiday market at downtowndcholiday.com. Happy gardening!
This is The Last Word by Christy Page with Green Prints, with Thanksgiving, the Gardener's Holiday by Pat Stone. I've always had a special affection for Thanksgiving. It seems to me the gentlest, the kindest of our holidays. There's no glaring red rockets or blowouts on beer. There's not the commercialization of Christmas when a blizzard of promotion buries the holiday's original purpose. It hasn't been gimmicked up with brash hats and colored eggs like Easter. Thanksgiving remains true to the words in its name. Thanksgiving is, in essence, a tribute to gardening. True, the hunter's bounty gets top billing, but the accompaniments, corn, rice, squash, pumpkins, the provisions that sustain the pilgrims through the cold months ahead, these come from growers who, for months, just cared for their crops. Hence, Thanksgiving reminds us that whether we live in a Manhattan high-rise or Vancouver houseboat, it is plants on which we depend. Oh, sure, today you can zip down to the local Safeway and pick up a fresh New Zealand apple or Mexican strawberry, foods that seem to have originated plastic-wrapped on a shelf. We don't eat them on Thanksgiving. We eat the foods people grow and store right here, provisions that declare their roots and our ties to them, foods that talk to us. The crops you grow and sustain, they say, are what grow and sustain you. Thanksgiving also reminds us that as plants give to us, so should we give to each other. For it was the generosity of the original Americans to some uninvited newcomers that created that first November feast. Cultivate each other, the mail reminds us. Give each other the gift of your food, of yourselves. What quiet, special lessons those are. With heads bowed and hands clasped, give thanks for fruits, friends, families. Then, like the plants and the gardeners who grew them, share. This has been The Last Word by Christy Page at greenprints.com.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. This episode was made by real humans. It was produced and hosted by myself, Kathy Jentz, with editing assistance from intern Cavit, Ireland. The Let the Sunshine music interludes are by James Mulvaney. If you like this episode, you may also enjoy listening to GardenDC episode 130, Groundcovers versus Groundcovers, episode 193, Epimediums, episode 53, Superior Perennials. By the way, you can become a listener supporter. Find that link in our show notes. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Pinterest at WDC Gardener, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast listening app. Please take a moment to share us on social media with hashtag GardenDC and with your gardening friends so other gardeners can find us too. My personal favorite sedum is Vera Jameson. It's a mid-sized sedum with striking foliage that starts out bluish green, then turns to burgundy and has dusty rose flowers in the fall. It was named after the woman who discovered it in her garden in England in the 1970s. It's a nice, small filler plant for the perennial border and a great doer. I highly recommend Vera Jameson.